Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5 of our wrestling podcast. So without further ado, the following topic is scheduled for one fall. And today's episode, Hogan versus Ric Flair. I do appreciate what they're trying to do nowadays.
It's not going to work.
It's appreciated. It's appreciated. It's appreciated.
I know, but it's not going to work.
It's appreciated.
It's not going to work.
Welcome to the O.W.P. This is our wrestling podcast. This is Dave, along with Jess
Okay.
and Cuz,
Hey, what's up, buds?
bringing you our perspective on the world of professional wrestling. No inside sources, no ties to the industry, just stories from the diehards, sharing our opinions with you. And now on to our topic today. Who was better? Hogan versus Flair. I got to tell you guys, when we first started to tackle this topic, I got pretty excited because I think it's an easy one to tackle. It's just not an easy question to answer. It's a lot of fun to discuss, but we're gonna jump right into it.
There's just a lot of shit to weed through on this.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So much shit.
But I promise, I broke it down to the nitty gritty. I did do a little bit of homework last night. I was watching some stuff on the network and found some things I never saw before. The network is just a plethora of great things when they're not trying to fuck around with old devices.
$9.99.
$9.99. That's right. But no longer on the PS3 and other items.
It was coming.
Read your manual. Anyway, so we're going to jump right into it, guys. Hogan v. Flair. We're going to start in the year of 1984. Does anybody know why 1984 is important? Jess, I know you know.
Well, it's when Hulk won his first WWF championship. But I think to paint the picture without wasting too much time,
Sure.
this is a question that when I was growing up was asked all the time. And the main reason why this was asked all the time is because it's not like, a dream match, Muhammad Ali in his prime versus Mike Tyson in his prime. Well, that would never have happened. They were just too far apart in age, and that never would have happened. So this was so real in the sense that if you weren't a wrestling fan back here, you didn't understand the appeal. They were a part of two separate companies. I mean, Vince has been all by himself since 2001. Competition wise, he's really been by himself since like late 99 because WCW just gave up. But it back here, the NWA was really viable, was a huge part of like the 70s and 80s, and was still on fire kind of leading up to when it sort of sold to Turner, a different podcast altogether. A big decision was made in, the 1980s, where Vince bought the company from his father and decided, I'm pulling away from the NWA umbrella and I'm going on my own. And I'm pitching my own company as my world championship is the begin all end all. My guy is the best. My wrestlers are the best. And NWA was on the other side of it going like, no, we all need to stay under the governing body of the NWA, Crockett Promotion being the biggest chunk, and Flair being the champion that would tour around.
It was the last real territory.
No, it's all of them. It was a bunch of territories under the NWA. That's how NWA functioned.
but you understand.
But yeah, like territory
they
was
try
still...
they try to keep it within their territory. It was the last big territory.
The territory theory was still running wild.
In NWA.
Pun intended. So the NWA was over like, the Carolinas, Florida, Texas. Flair would go through and wrestle the Von Erichs and all that. Yeah. It was very important, whereas Vince pulled away and said, I'm not doing that anymore. My guy is the guy. So the reason why people started talking about it was because Vince started gaining tons of momentum, which we're going to get into right now, and started syndicating his stuff, having better production values, talking to cable companies, or syndicating his stuff on network TV as well, like having a network special.
Which is how most of us got into it, by the way.
Yeah, and Saturday Night's Main Event was a huge deal. And so Vince just made his product very distinct and pretty much said, so it was natural. Well, who's better? Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair? That was a natural thing to talk about.
I am the master of this sport from my end. And you know what really irks a lot of people out there? If you know any history about Ric Flair, you know that the difference between me and just about everybody else is I was born with a golden spoon in my mouth.
Thank God, Mean Gene, I got my pump back, man. The pythons are ready, the largest arms in the world. Yeah, I'm glad they are because I checked this dude Hercules out, man. He's got the body of a god. He even looks like the real Hercules. and he's definitely stronger, man. But I checked the dude out even farther. He could have been a Greek god. He could have been an immortal. And you know something, Mean Gene? Since he's guided by Bobby the Weasel Heenan, I trained for the dude like he was an immortal, brother. I've been hanging out in the Garden of Eden with my main squeeze Eve. I dove 20,000 leagues under the sea, 40 nights and 40 days. I hung and bung on the Titanic.
I mean, at least in our side, we wouldn't even have wrestling acumen. We wouldn't have wrestling passion. We wouldn't have known about NWA without WWF. And the only way that happened is with network syndication. So it is something to be. It is a big deal, and it is why a lot of people would see. I'm not saying that we see this, but you would see Hogan over Flair because of that mainstream nostalgia. That it was just there. You know, they ran. They were the face that ran the place.
You just have to take my word for it. When you grew up in the 80s, this was a dead serious question. Who's better, Hogan or Flair? They were always compared to each other because they were on opposite sides of the fence, literally.
Yeah. And it was a legit question, and it's a fun question to fall back on because anybody who is a real wrestling fan is going to know the two of these guys because they set the tone for wrestling going forward, right? So, jumping right into 1984, Jess, whose championship is that first?
Hulk Hogan won his first WWF championship from the Iron Sheik in January of 1984.
And how long would that span run?
Hulk Hogan's first run was 4 years.
That's incredible. That's a
third longest, right?
Third longest. Wasn't even the longest. San Martino's first run was the longest, and then Backlund was 6 years.
Yeah,
or like 5 years and some change. Yeah, 6 years, and Hulk was 4 years.
But Hogan's run is the first run to what we're talking about not syndication, but into national affiliate.
It was under Vince Jr.'s control.
Under that control, 4 years under that,
and again. When you won a championship back then, it's hard to relate to now because it doesn't exist.
So meaningful.
It was like a promotion at work. It was like you were the biggest draw. You were the champion because that promoter paraded you around the territory or whatever it was, and you were the biggest money draw. That's what you did, and it's not like that anymore. It did, the WWE is a brand now, and that's it. Back here, Vince had aspirations of becoming a brand, but he still needed a guy to spearhead it. And you had all this great talent underneath, don't get me wrong, but Hulk Hogan was the guy that appealed to the casual wrestling fan more than anybody else. And that's who you wanted to put your title on, the guy who could draw the casual fan, the guy who people could get behind, or in a heel's case, the guy who would make people so pissed at him that people would pay money to watch him get his ass beat. And that right there defines the difference between Hogan and Flair. So I can't stress enough what a championship meant. And for someone to be champion for 4 years, wrestling moves so fast now. I mean, so many hours of television, and it really sped up because of the Monday Night Wars, but like it just moves so fast now. Back here, they had time to breathe, and they had syndicated television, but Vince pre-taped it. So he told the story the way he wanted to at the speed he wanted to. So not to go off on a tangent, but it was really important. Championships that we talk about between these two guys were super important. It meant you were like getting a promotion at work, or you were the lead salesperson, or however you want to compare it to understand that notion.
Well, WCW, isn't his first title reign the longest in WCW?
Who?
Hogan?
No.
Like the longest or one of the longest?
So. Maybe one of the longest. Yeah, maybe one of the longest.
It is still
his first title.
Yeah, it's still one of the longest, but it's not the longest. Shifting gears on that to Flair before we even get into WCW, because there's no WCW at this moment, right? We're still in the NWA era. Flair was already a 2-time NWA champion by 1984. And I know some people don't like to talk about this, but unofficially, you can call him a 4-time champ due to unofficial title changes and recaptures. Puerto Rico comes to mind. I believe Carlos Colon, right? Is that right? Was one of them who took that title, but they don't recognize it. And Flair wins it back about a week later. So those things happen. Through 1986, he could have been a 4-time champ at that point. By 91, Flair's actually an 8-time champion and recognized as WCW's first champion when that comes into play. So my question to you guys, let's put it on the table. What's better in your mind? I know, Jess, you really dug into the 4-year run and how much you really appreciate that and find that a big deal. But is a 4-year run of that stability, or is it the ability to overcome and become a multiple champion? What in your mind is more impressive?
There were two different promotions, really, especially because Vince branched off on his own. By doing that, he knew I need a face. And Vince Sr. always kind of catered to faces anyway. Bruno Sammartino being a perfect example, Bob Backlund.
Sure.
There was champions that he loved faces. That's what he loved to do. But Vince Sr. was also kind of would break away from the NWA umbrella and then go back to it, and then break away and go back to it. I mean, he had a falling out for a while with NWA. I don't remember the specific years. So they've always kind of marched to the beat of their own drummer, so to speak, the McMahons. So when Vince bought it from Senior, Vince Jr. bought it from Senior, he was like, I'm going to put myself in a bubble. I'm pushing my product. Why would I want to share everything else with this NWA umbrella? I don't want to do that.
You selfish bastard.
Made his own universe.
Because no matter what, I'm going to have to kneel down to the champion when he comes through. Even if I have my own WWF champion, when the NWA World Champion comes through, I have to kind of play like he's the man. But I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that?
Yeah, he broke free.
Like the Avengers, or like is always said in the Avengers movies, somebody will say it, we have a Hulk. And that's basically what Vince did. Once he understood who he had, and he pulled Hulk Hogan over from the AWA, and Hogan was riding that wave of Rocky III and all that stuff and all that interest, and just looked the part and had the charisma. Vince just said, I have a Hulk, so I don't really need your umbrella. I don't need your permission. I don't need anything like that. I am going to put myself in a vacuum, and I'm not going to reference anybody else, because when you're the best, you don't ever reference number 2 or number 3.
Yeah.
And that's what Vince really was firm with. So he stuck with that. I'm going to have a babyface champion, and I'm going to feed him heels, and he's going to knock them off. And that's how he produced Hogan's 4-year run. Whereas Flair was on the other side of it. He was part of the NWA umbrella. He had to go to territory. So if you were like a governing body of the NWA, and you had like Florida, mid-Atlantic, Carolinas, Texas, all these different places where they had their champions, but the NWA champion was the guy, the world champion. That's why whenever Flair talks about how prestigious it was in the 70s and 80s, it really was
a big deal,
because the whole wrestling world, except for Vince Jr. at this point, was catered to the NWA champion.
Yeah, they recognized that time.
And the NWA, whoever was on the NWA committee, would say, we want this guy to wear our title.
Yeah, it wasn't a one-man person saying, this is who's going to wear it, this is going to.
It was a committee.
It was a committee.
And they chose Flair because they felt like he could be.
Not only did they choose Flair, they chose Flair several times. Mm-hmm. They always went back to Flair. And
because they were under the formula, they were opposite of Vince of, we're going to use a heel, and then when he goes to each territory, their hot babyface will try to knock him off.
Yeah.
And then every now and then it would happen, and then Flair would win it back,
back.
a month later or whatever. Even I'm even talking about the recognized ones.
Because
Kerry Von Erich won it, and then
because NWA followed the formula.
But it was during Flair's tour of Texas, so he would lose it, and then he would win it back before he left the territory.
But the formula we're talking about is it's all about the chase. Finally, that face would win it, but 2 weeks later, Flair would.
And then he would leave Texas and go somewhere else, and then fight their hot baby face, whether it be Junkyard Dog or wherever they were.
Sure.
And then he would, do that, and they go to somewhere. And that's how the NWA champion functioned. He just bounced around from territory. And a heel works better in this case. That's why Race was champion so many times, who was a heel during his run, because you wanted the baby faces to have to chase this guy. So, the champion's coming to our territory, and I want to see our babyface, our Florida heavyweight champion, finally knock the NWA championship. We want to own the NWA World Championship. I want to be able to say that our territory has the NWA champion.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
we brought the title home.
That's basically the way it worked, without getting into super details about the territory. So that was the major difference in the climate that Hulk was in versus the climate Rick was in.
Yeah, and it makes it hard to compare, but I still enjoy that conversation.
No, I mean, it's the most interesting comparison, because you had fans of the NWA that were, and the NWA always promoted real wrestling in the sense, because that's the easiest way when you're bouncing from territory to territory. you just had Flair, who would go in there and adapt to anybody's style. And that's how great Rick was, is that he would go in there and he would know, okay, I got to go in and wrestle their hot babyface. I can't shit on their hot babyface because I will kill the territory if I do that. So when we come back in 6 months, nobody will come and see it because I shit. So I have to escape with the skin of my teeth or whatever, or, cheat by pinning him with my feet on the ropes, or,
where you call the dusty finish and things like that.
Yeah. Just to keep the
Before it was
territories
dusty
hot,
finish.
which is why the dusty finish stopped working when the WCW went on its own after the NWA kind of sort of died out.
Because it wasn't territorial.
Well, yeah, it doesn't work. It only works with territories. So this is the super interesting dynamic between these two back in this time.
So 1991 to 92 is the first time these two actually head up into the same federation. They're both a part of the WWF at this point, and Flair literally out of nowhere decides we're going to strap him. He goes into the Royal Rumble, becomes pretty much an Iron Man.
I got to back you way up on this one.
Okay.
Everything leading up, Jim Herd, WCW was already purchased by Turner. Or the Crockett promotion portion of the NWA, which was the biggest part, was purchased by Turner. So basically, the NWA, it tried to be its own governing body after that, but when it lost to Crockett promotion, that was its heart and soul. So the NWA concept died shortly thereafter. And they tried to revise it; it didn't work.
And when you say it died, you say like Flair's like, this isn't going to work. I got to bounce.
No, it was just the concept. Crockett had the really biggest promotion. It covered the biggest territory.
Yeah.
So when you pull the biggest,
the last territory,
and Flair was kind of not really like strictly Crockett's, but he would spend more time in the Crockett promotion than any other promotion.
Sure.
So it was the biggest. It had the Horsemen. It had everybody. It had Road Warriors eventually. It had everybody Sting after
Steiner's, right?
So basically, long story short, Vince created this environment where you have to play catch up with me. So if you don't get on the ball about production value, if you don't get on the ball about syndication, if you don't get on the ball about a lot of pay-per-view, if you don't get on the ball about a lot of shit, you're going to be behind. Well, that ended up happening. So Crockett Promotion got desperate in 87 and bought Bill Watts's UWF. And they overpaid for it, and they didn't know what to do with their talent. So they kind of buried and shit on their talent when the talent came over to Crockett Promotion. They didn't know what to do with it. So they spent all this money on buying the UWF, which they thought, oh yeah, now we got Vince now because I'm buying the UWF. He's got all these guys. So Vince steps in, and when the purchase happened, that was Vince's window. And he's like, hey, Hacksaw, hey, DiBiase, hey, anybody who's worth the shit.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Come on over. Come on over to me. I'll pay you this. I'll pay you that. So I bring the UWF into focus here because this is kind of Flair's path. Once Crockett sold or purchased UWF, there's a famous story that Jim Cornette tells where one of the Crockett's go into a room with their financial advisor and come out, and he's just like ghost white, and he realizes he's like $2 million in the hole almost, and wrestling's hot at this point. This is like 87 and late 87, and they're making a lot of money, but they're spending so much, and the purchase of the UWF was a huge mistake. And so basically he was like, I got to sell the Crockett promotions, the territories that I own, which is a huge chunk of what the NWA resided over. So Rick then was actually going to start talking to Vince. But then what happened was Turner stepped in, and long story short, I think I've mentioned on past podcasts, is that he had a soft spot for wrestling because wrestling helped keep ratings up while he sorted out his TBS channels and all that. So Turner said, I'll buy it. And, but here's the thing. If Ric Flair leaves, I'm not going to buy it. So he talked to Flair. He made Flair a good offer. Flair stayed aboard. And then the purchase went through sometime in 1988, where Turner bought the Jim Crockett promotion. So basically Turner turned it into WCW. That's how it became WCW.
WCW.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. So basically they didn't start calling it the WCW. They still called it the NWA Championship because even though Turner owned it, the NWA governing body was still kind of over it. And
It was still in place.
Yeah, they still had the NWA Championship in WCW, but that relationship was getting murky. So basically, now the purchase is done. So we've yada-yada past what Hulk had done in one consistent swoop in his 4-year stint. Yeah. He wins a title. He is in the main event of the first WrestleMania, which was groundbreaking in itself. He defeated King Kong Bundy in main event at WrestleMania 2 and defended his title. Then he beat Andre, slammed him in front of 93,000 people at WrestleMania 3 in 1987 at the Silverdome, and was pretty much at that point untouchable. I mean, Hulk Hogan's stock was fucking huge in 1987.
I'm fighting for life, brother.
He sure was. And so was Vince, as a matter of fact. And he, at this point, you have to understand that there was no hiccups on Vince's part. It was up and up and up. And that was his plan. And so Hulk and Vince were hot. They were doing what Vince wanted to do. And that was choke everybody else out. Only recognize ourselves. So now you have Crockett, who's just threatened and spending too much money and realizes I'm fucked. I got to sell my portion of my territories now. Turner steps in, buys it. They limp along.
Yeah.
Jim Herd gets hired by WCW.
Big
is
mistake.
A total piece of shit. And wants to cut Ric Flair's hair and call him Spartacus, blah, blah, blah. And all that stuff. So in 1991, Herd was just kind of like not wanting to pay Flair money and wanted to get the title off Flair. So he's just like, Flair's like, fine, I'll lose the title to whoever you want to, but like, you're going to pay me for it. Yeah. And Herd's like, pretty much go fuck yourself. Yeah. And Flair's like, no, fuck you. Like, I'm out of here. And so Flair's like, fine. He's all the next house show. Herd was like, the next house show, fly and drop the title to Luger. Well, that's fine, but you're going to pay me for it. No, I'm not. Okay, well, fuck you. Then I'm not going to do that. Okay, well, then, you know what? You're fired. And Flair's like, good, goodbye. What he didn't understand, Herd, when he came aboard,
this is so bad.
When WCW was purchased, was that title, that big gold belt that's so famous. The world champion kind of owned part of it. He would actually put a deposit down because he was responsible for it. So it was kind of like insurance.
Didn't they say like 20,000 or 25?
It was like 10 to 20,000 or something. Flair was. There was a lot of money that Flair laid down because he's going to travel with it too. And it's kind of like
he's not responsible for it.
Yeah, he's responsible for it. So he put his own money on it. So if he lost it, well, they'll make a new belt, but now they have $10,000 of Flair's money, for example.
Sure.
So that's basically what it was. So Flair's like, fuck it. You have $10,000 of my money. Give me my money back. And Herd, again, was like, fuck you. You're fired. Fuck off. Cool. I'm taking the belt with me. You can't do that. Give me my $10,000 and you can have your fucking belt back. Well, Herd drug his feet. And he called Vince and said, hey, I can come over. I'm done with WCW. Vince is like, okay. And he's like, oh, and one more thing. I have the fucking belt. I have their belt. And Vince is like, so legally, what can we do? Flair's like, I can bring it over. I kind of own it in a sense, or own part of it. I have a $10,000 deposit, and he refuses to pay me. Vince is like, bring that shit to me. So Flair brought it to him, and Bobby the Brain Heenan, and an episode in August of 1991, early August, appears just holding the belt by himself. And he gives probably the most chilling promo as a fan I've ever heard. Not because it's a great promo or it wasn't, 5 minutes long. It was this simple clip. He comes up on Superstars holding this title that I had known as a fan to be NWA. And he's holding the fucking thing on WWF television.
What I'm holding here is the belt that belongs to the real world champion. Oh no, not Hulk Hogan. Presently, the man that owns this belt is under contract to another organization. But in the near future, he may be arriving in the World Wrestling Federation. If so, it would be my honor and privilege to be the advisor of this man. Now, you want to compare this belt to Hulk Hogan's? That would be like comparing ice cream to horse manure. You want to compare the man that wears this belt to Hulk Hogan? That would be like comparing ice cream to horse manure. You see, Hulk Hogan is the World Wrestling Federation champion. The man that owns this belt is the real
So
champion.
The appeal of this video and what makes it so unique and kind of so opposite of what Vince ever did. Part of me really believes that this blow Vince believed was going to put WCW out of business, not realizing that Ted Turner's like ridiculously rich and no matter how much money he was losing, he was going to keep it on life support.
Sure.
But Bobby Heenan shows up on WWF television with the NWA Heavyweight Championship in his hand. No Ric Flair, which is also genius.
Yeah.
And just pretty much says the guy who owns this belt is the real world champion and he's coming. He's coming for you, Hogan, and he's going to prove to you that he's the best, that he's always been the best. So I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact. So I'm sure Cuz is going to play the clip and make me look stupid because I totally got it wrong. Flair's like, Hogan's the best and Flair sucks. And I'm like, I don't remember that.
What the fuck?
So after that,
I'm going to style and profile for you for about 30 seconds.
Ric Flair heard me. So basically, and then a month later, they do every week. They do kind of more Flair videos. Then Flair would start, at the beginning of Superstars, it would be like Vince and somebody else welcoming you to Superstars. Flair would be holding the belt in his hands for weeks to come. And then a cute little skit they did at SummerSlam 91 before the main event. Flair excused himself from the commentary booth and he walked down the hall at Madison Square Garden going, "Come on, cameraman." And he's got the NWA championship in his hand going, I'm going to knock on Hogan's dressing room door and I'm going to tell him about the real world champion. And he knocks on Hulk's door and the door opens, but you don't see Hogan. You assume that it is him. And then he's like, "Hello, Mr. Hogan, on behalf of the real world champion," and the door slams in his face and he does a, Bobby Heenan stick, kind of fall and fumbles with the belt or whatever. And he's like, "You'll pay for this," and all that stuff.
Come on, dummy. I don't have all day. I'm a busy man. Right here is the dressing room of the WWF champion Hulk Hogan. And I'm going to embarrass him and I'm going to show you what kind of a man he is. Hogan, open the door. I'm a busy man. Wait till you see this. On behalf of the real world's champion, Ric Flair, I would like to challenge you, Hogan, at any time, any place. Who do you think you're embarrassing? You hear me? You wouldn't do that if Ric Flair was standing here. Do you hear me?
So the whole thing was just so beautifully thought out by Vince. You still had not seen Flair at all on this point. Then on an episode in September of Primetime Wrestling, Bobby Heenan comes out with the belt and says, "You're going to meet Ric Flair tonight." And Flair comes out and cuts a promo that he's in WWF now. So now we get the dream match, right? For fucking crying out loud. After all these years of Hogan's 4-year run, Flair winning the NWA title and being the working man's champion and going territory to territory, having these classic matches with Steamboat, Hulk slammed Andre, main evented WrestleManias. Flair had the classic feud with Funk. Got Sting's career started. All this stuff has happened. Now
he's kind of a big deal.
Both of them are big deals at this point. And fuck it, right? Vince has got them both now. Vince has got them both. It's over. WCW, it's over. It's over for you. And now I've got fucking Ric Flair with the NWA title on my TV and Hulk Hogan, my crown jewel, who's helped me kind of dominate the world and put a stranglehold on the wrestling industry.
Yeah.
Blow my brother's legs off.
Whose legs? Blow my brother's legs off. What? He's blowing people's legs off. So Hogan's on fire. So now you're like, fuck yes, this is going to happen. Flair starts calling Hulk out immediately in promos. And so here it is, ladies and gentlemen, they start introducing them on house shows together, main eventing. The very first time they ever met, they actually never advertised the match. They just had them wrestle on a house show. So people were shitting their pants in the arena.
Yeah.
So then Vince is like, okay, he was testing them. What markets are hot? You would think that Flair and Hulk would be a sellout anywhere, right? So unfortunately not. In the big markets like Madison Square Garden and I think Meadowlands, I could be wrong on that, Boston, they sold out. Then they started advertising him, Hulk versus Flair, only on house shows. They never talked about it on TV. Flair, in the meantime, on television was feuding with Piper.
Sure.
And that's how because he was just warming Flair up, getting going.
Of course. You don't want to give all that shit away.
WCW,
right away.
WCW filed legal proceedings. You can't show the NWA belt on TV anymore. They, I believe, paid Flair his $10,000. So that's when Flair started coming out with the belt blurred. And it was like a tag team championship that was refaced to say real world's heavyweight champion or world heavyweight champion, something like that. Yeah. So that's when you start seeing Flair, when he would move fast, the bubble or the blur would not catch up in time. And you would see, why is Flair holding a tag belt? It was actually a tag belt that they refaced to say world heavyweight champion on it. So to continue that storyline, and then Monsoon on the TV would be like, well, legally we can't show that anymore because you know what? It's not the WWF championship. Hulk Hogan is our WWF champion. So
good spin.
So they were testing out Hulk versus Flair with Hulk as champion with creative endings as, Flair would hit him with brass knucks, actually pin him, and the place would kind of go nuts. Like there was Flair mania running wild out there. People were crazy to see him come aboard. And then the ref would come in and brass knucks would fall out of Flair's tights and the ref would be like, wait a minute, those fell out of your trunks. Oh, Hulk Hogan wins by DQ. So they were doing all that. They were, and the arenas they didn't sell out, they were still putting, like 80% of the building full in there. But I think Vince started to lose confidence for some reason because Hulk was old at this point. I say that it's really funny because when he came back later in the NWO, he's much older and he re-revolutionized wrestling pretty much. But I mean, well, the concept did.
And you make the comparisons now of wrestlers today, they're that age.
But Hulk's initial run was starting to fall flat.
Sure.
He was already 4-time champion at this point, or actually he was 3-time champion at this point. Before
all runs have to end, bro.
Yeah. And he was, the steroid scandal broke. He was actually getting really flabby and out of shape because he had to get off the roids. So he had to like kind of change his diet and change his regimen. Flair, I believe Flair turned 42 in 92. So Flair came into WWF as 41-year-old Ric Flair, so it's crazy. We just, all that time passed by in the 80s, all their prime for the most part.
Yeah.
So we get them, and the whole illusion of Flair versus Hulk like captured us. But then when you actually saw it start to happen, you were like, it's not as good as maybe it should be or it could be, and we don't know why. Basically what happened was Hulk's relationship was strained with Vince. Undertaker beat Hulk at Survivor Series of 91. Hulk won it back like 2 days later on the Tuesday Night in Texas rip-off pay-per-view. And basically that's how they, because Hulk used ashes and Flair came out and interfered, and Jack Tunney kind of saw Hulk use the ashes, but the ref didn't. So Jack Tunney said, I'm taking the title away from both of you. Hulk Hogan stripped of the title, and it's going to be held up at the Royal Rumble 92. And whoever wins the Royal Rumble 1992 will be the world champion. Dave, take it away from where you said.
So that's where we get into the Royal Rumble, where the winner of the Royal Rumble is actually going to be your WWF champion. And you would all think, because and this is the back then kind of conversation. We know what we know now, right? We didn't know this then. We didn't know that Hogan's relationship was strained with Vince. We didn't know that Hogan wanted to go and do movies. We didn't know that stuff. We saw movies later, but we didn't realize that was all going on behind the scenes. So I think the majority of us assumed that it would either be Hogan winning that title at the Royal Rumble, because that kind of stuff happens. He always seems to persevere and overcome. Or you could see maybe Sid Vicious, because
I was going to say Sid was new at the time.
Yeah, Sid was new. He was big. He was a face too.
Yeah, and moment. Vince loves big uns. He loves them big uns.
The so we like, it's going to be Sid or it's going to be Hogan.
And Linda, if you want another baby, I'm your genetic jackhammer.
So we had Sid Vicious and we had Hulk Hogan as our 1 and 2 possibilities of winning the Rumble when we were kids.
Well, and a lot of people say, this is probably the most star-studded Rumble. You had the British Bulldog, you had Piper, you had Flair, you had Hogan, you had Sid, you had Randy Savage, you had The Undertaker, you had Jake Roberts, you had Texas Tornado. Kerry Von Erich had, in the wrestling industry, Kerry Von Erich, was known.
Yeah.
So, and you had, I'm sure I'm missing tons of people.
Perfect, I mean? Maybe not.
No, Perfect was in Flair's corner at this point.
Oh, yeah, he was hurt.
Yeah.
Still get that back in.
So you had a lot of people.
But a lot of faces up and around it. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, it was just a really star-studded name-wise. This was a really active Royal Rumble.
But the last thing.
Some people still say the greatest Royal Rumble of all time.
It really can't be when the title's on the line.
Mainly because of who won and the significance of it.
Well, that's the thing. I think nobody thought that Vince even thought to put the strap on Flair, because in the North, in the territories of, I said the lack of territories, it was a babyface world, and Flair was just not that. So the babyface would always win and hold and carry. They did everything backwards. So nobody thought that. Honestly, Flair was just going to get his ass kicked for a good 50 minutes, but he hung in there.
I figured Flair was going to be the Iron Man like he was.
Sure, and he was.
But he ended up being the Iron Man. And Vince unusually pushed Flair in this row. I mean, we'll just say it right now. Flair wins.
Sure.
And they do a little thing with Hulk at the end where Sid had been a face, and then Sid comes up behind Hulk while he's tied up with Flair. They do a little spot where Hulk starts beating on Flair, and Sid backs off in the corner and pretty much says, "Have at it." And then when Hogan turns his back and tries to eliminate Flair, Sid comes and dumps him out.
Yeah.
Then Hulk does a kind of a heel move where he grabs Sid's arm, and then from behind, Flair dumps Sid out and wins. And actually, if you go back,
how does Hogan get away with that shit all the time?
Well, he got booed.
Of course,
he got booed heavily right afterwards.
But he was.
And that's the problem is Vince was just trying to. Vince was coming. This is my proof, and I'm talking as a fan. We're not wrestling observers. We're not pro wrestling insiders. We don't report the news. But at the same time,
We don't lie.
As a fan, now I look back and I look at this. Vince never was married to Hulk versus Flair, ever. Even though leading up to Mania, after Flair won the title here at the Rumble, they announced that Hulk was the #1 contender. But Vince did this with Sid to plant the seed that either Sid's going to challenge Hulk after Mania, because the original plans, again, I'll spoil this too, was Hulk to beat Flair.
Sure.
That was the original plans of WrestleMania 8. But Vince wasn't married on Hulk versus Flair. So what he did was, he did the thing with Sid, and Sid afterwards was kind of bitter. He didn't fully turn heel Sid, but he was bitter that Hulk got the nod from, they did a ridiculously fake press conference where Jack Tunney named the #1 contender for Flair at Mania, and he named Hulk, and Sid was pissed because Sid was like the last one in the ring with Flair at the Rumble. So it should have been him. Sid eliminated Hogan from the Rumble. So why the hell would Hogan get it? So like, Vince did this whole thing on purpose for 2 reasons. One, their relationship, Hulk and Vince, was very strained in the back in real life.
Sure.
Hulk was coming at the end of his run. He was tired and old. And by that, I mean, like, his character was super old and tired. Yeah. He was starting to get booed a little bit, even back here. Yeah. And Hulk physically looked awful and was tired.
Hulkamania was dying.
Yeah, he wanted to go away. And the industry was changing, but nobody really knew it yet. So Vince...
I'm fighting for life, brother.
Vince wanted to be sure, okay, if Hulk's not going to commit, I'm not going to put the title on Hulk. The plan was for Hulk to beat Flair and win the title. That was the plan. Sure. However, he was like, if Hulk's not going to commit, I need this Sid thing.
I have this backup.
Yeah, this backup where I could split the main event and do Savage versus Flair and Hulk versus Sid, and then Hulk could go away and go fuck himself for all he cared. But if Hulk wants to stay, he could beat Flair, and then Sid will be his challenger afterwards.
Sure.
So that was kind of like set in place. So Vince never married to Hulk versus Rick, even though we all wanted it. It should have happened, but Hulk couldn't commit, and Hulk ended up going away. They ended up splitting the main event, and Hulk and Flair in the promotion you thought that it would happen in never happened.
Yeah.
They did on house shows.
Yeah.
But not the big pay-per-view blow off like you thought, not the big dream match. Hulk versus Flair finally.
I'm sure you
in a promotion where Vince puts a title on him. I mean, Flair lasted an hour in the ring at the Royal Rumble and then still fucking wins.
This is the greatest moment in my life. When you walk around this world and you tell everybody you're #1, the only way you get to stay #1 is to be #1. And this is the only title in the wrestling world that makes you #1. When you are the king of the WWE, you rule.
So everything about that night and the way Vince booked Flair was so unusual because Vince never booked heels like that. Yeah. He let him, Flair was the star of the night. He was the Iron Man in that match. He wins it and then has that amazing promo afterwards, which people still talk about to this day. Who the fuck was smoking a cigarette? I think Bruce Pritchard talks about it on his podcast. I don't remember. Yeah. But it's just an amazing, so he really puts Flair over. And you think, man, now he's Hulk Hogan ready. We have an opponent for Hulk after he beats Flair. And Flair probably would have been put in another program and then eventually rematch Hulk at SummerSlam. You know, it was all going to happen. It was going to be like a couple matches they were going to do. But Vince likes to draw things out back here. And it could have been like a 6-month to a year program where we got this dream
back then you only had 4 pay-per-views a year. So,
but it never happened.
Yeah.
Savage ended up beating Flair at Mania 8
Which,
in a great match.
Great match.
Hulk went away like he was supposed to. Warrior came back to kind of take his place. Flair sort of floundered through the summer. And then beats Savage at this ridiculous house show to win the title for the second time. Yeah. Personally, behind the scenes, Savage and Elizabeth were going through a divorce.
Yeah.
And like it really got to Savage, so he didn't really want to perform well in the ring. So Flair ends up winning the title from Savage out of nowhere in a house show shortly after SummerSlam 92. And then Rick started having inner ear problems. Basically, Vince lost confidence in him, and the steroid trial was getting more intensified here. It was coming up. The allegations were coming out. The pressure was on Vince to really go back to natural-looking athletes.
Well, natural, and I have to go younger, pal.
Yeah. Bret Hart beats Flair out of nowhere at late 92.
And just look at this. Flair's getting up, and he's trying to detract the referee, but he didn't.
Oh, he gave up. We've seen history made. Let's get the official word.
So now you have Ric Flair pretty much floundering until the beginning of '93. They put him in a program with Mr. Perfect, who came out of retirement and all that stuff. And again, another podcast for itself because the Warrior was a bitch and left / got
There's
fired
so much.
/
There's so
failed
much going
something.
on.
Yeah, there's so much going on. It's WWF was in turmoil at the end of '92.
Well, you didn't know it on TV.
You kind of did because people were changing and all of a sudden there were Brett's champion out of nowhere and all that stuff. But Vince's production's so good.
And that
it
also
still looked like WWF.
Well, the production's one thing, but it also leads into a realm of reality because there was a time where we still thought this shit was real. So
Right.
when you started seeing people out of nowhere, well, God, how did Flair do that? I can't believe what a fluke. Oh, but that can happen in real life, right? And then Flair getting beat by Hart out of nowhere or Macho beating him out of nowhere, all that stuff. And you don't realize what's going on underneath until a few years later. Like, holy shit, what a shitstorm it was. And again, you can't blame Hogan or Flair for any of that. I mean, really,
you can blame Hulk if you want.
Yeah,
They'll be trying to drink their own sweat to survive.
and they kind of did. They were really
so
struggling.
yeah. So basically, and
explains them very well.
the day after
Inspiration.
Royal Rumble 1993, Flair lost a loser leaves WWF match to Mr. Perfect, and he's gone.
Yeah,
and just like that,
out of nowhere.
we had this whole buildup in the '80s of this dream match of Hulk versus Rick, and all the accomplishments, like I said, leading up to that point. And then you get in there, and then Flair wins a title, and by the way, he became the second man only to ever win both the NWA and WWF World Championships. The first one was Buddy Rogers.
Yeah.
Who was NWA champion and then became the first WWF champion, WWF champion.
Yeah, and while he does leave to kind of put us in track, Flair by 93 is a 10-time NWA champ and a 2-time WWF champ. And by 94, merged the NWA and WCW titles. Going back, Hogan takes a bit of a hiatus.
Yeah, WCW in 93 tried to bring the NWA back and had the NWA championship in the promotion and the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, which was a big clusterfuck.
Yeah, that didn't fly.
And then NWA pulled out mid-year, and then they just started calling it like the Big Gold Belt. I think they even changed it to the International Championship. But yeah, at the beginning of '94, when Eric Bischoff knew that he was going to bring Hulk in,
that's when everything changed.
They pretty much merged the titles. So Flair won the international title from Sting. Flair was already world champion from beating Vader at Starrcade in '93. And so now the stage is set. Now fucking finally.
Just to rewind a little bit, there is a brief little hiatus there where Hogan briefly comes back and wins another world title off of Yokozuna inside of a 2-minute title run. Let's not forget WrestleMania 9, which is a total clusterfuck.
I'm aware of how destiny.
Hulk Hogan was the first 3-time, 4-time, and 5-time WWF champion, by the way. Before
I didn't want to skip that over, sorry.
He did go away after 92 when we said he went ahead, and he came back and tried this ridiculous comeback, and it flopped, and he went away.
Because he still came back with Hulkamania, and they thought, we'll get after the break, he'll come back. And by the way, he did get that big pop after Brett lost the title to Yokozuna. 2 minutes in.
But it wasn't good for the business.
On a personal note,
his black eye.
I'm pretty sure Jess almost broke his screen door running out the screen door.
Oh, I ran out of the screen door screaming.
You couldn't believe it.
Ran around the house. It was really funny. I was like, this is the funniest shit I've ever seen.
The times that wrestling was back then.
Yeah.
It was awesome, though.
Well, it was half like we were getting older, so we knew it was fake, obviously. So we were trying to, and there was no internet, nothing like that.
Yeah.
So we were trying to understand the behind the scenes work, but we also treated it like it was kind of real. Because it's really the funnest when you get into a pay-per-view and you treat it like it's real. It's fun. It's really fun just to kind of forget reality for a minute.
And all you get out of that though is you get a European tour where Hogan's not even holding the title because Yoko wins it back sometime later, and you get that one.
Yoko beat him at King of the Ring '93.
And then you get the Euro tour where Hogan's not even holding the strap.
Done that.
Hogan! The photographer, they gotta get that photographer down. He shouldn't be up on the apron. It's a dangerous place to be.
Well, these pictures are so.
Oh my God!
What was that?
This camera exploded.
What?
Right in Hogan's face. This camera exploded in Hogan's face. Yokozuna drops a leg on Hogan. Yokozuna, the leg hook. Yokozuna.
We got a new champion. We got a new champion. What the hell happened? Obviously, his camera exploded.
And then from there, Hogan's just kind of promoting a Euro tour with no strap.
Well, he was doing Thunder in Paradise, correct?
Yeah. Well, he was
still great times though.
He was getting ready to, and obviously that wasn't going to work for Vince because Vince makes you work 300 days a year at least. Where, to your point, where Jess was talking earlier, Bischoff's like, oh, You only want to work so many days? Come on down.
Yeah, and
Still
at this
take-
point, Eric Bischoff was in charge of WCW. now.
Exactly.
He took over WCW in like early '93, and then slowly started to turn the corner for them, cut costs, did what he needed to do. He was a real big fan of Vince's production values, so Bischoff started putting more production, putting more emphasis on production values. So ironically, Ric Flair is the one who pretty much approached Eric Bischoff and said, I can go talk to Hogan. What kind of money are we talking about here? Are you dead serious about getting Hulk in here? We could get Hulk in WCW if you tell me that we can offer him. So, of course, Bischoff went to his higher ups and Turner and all them.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we'll offer him this, that, and the other. You really think you can get Hulk Hogan to come to WCW? And
That is at that time, that's fucking nuts. to
yeah,
even think about
again,
that.
this Hogan was over the hill as far as his character was.
Not
and
even
everything.
that. It's Hulk fucking Hogan.
But this is-
jumping ship.
This was equally as big as Flair coming in '91 to WWF, where WCW, the number 2 promotion, was like, finally, you know what? Fuck it. We're just going to throw it all in and roll the dice, and we're going
Let's
to
see
get the
what
biggest
happens.
name in wrestling history.
Because you know what WCW saw in Hogan?
Here comes the money.
That's super true.
Here comes the
Oh,
money.
are we going to play the whole fucking thing?
No.
Goddamn.
Absolutely not. But
Yeah.
hey, can't blame them.
It was,
Not blame them.
how old were you here,
Here comes
cuz?
the
It's like
money.
4? No.
By then, by what?
When were you born?
93? 94,
You were
94.
born in
I was,
you were
yes, I
born-
was 9 years old.
When were you born?
85.
84?
85.
85.
God, that's why I love. Oh my God.
So you were 9 years old.
Yeah. When you were talking about WrestleMania 9,
Like I just did basic math, like I stumbled upon something.
I was told.
Wait a
to be
minute.
I mean,
if
I
I add
kinda
the
told
years
you the
together,
answer,
it's you were
yeah.
9 years old. Fuck.
I mean, yeah.
we should call
Kind of retarded.
There you go.
we should call that math.
Yeah.
No, I just when you guys were talking about that, I was like, God damn, I remember that because I didn't actually watch that live. I remember seeing it. What did you probably showed it
live?
to me when we were talking about WrestleMania 9 earlier.
Oh yeah.
So I was just saying, like,
I had it on
that
tape.
brought
I
me
showed it
back.
to everybody.
Yeah, that it just brought me back, and
Yeah.
goddamn, good
So-
times. Even though it was shitty times for them, but good times.
So taking it back on track here, this is where finally, you feel like the magnetism is finally coming back together, and then it's Bash at the Beach.
So
right?
well, WCW scores him, right?
Yeah, they score him.
And then Flair unifies the title. Flair unifies the title at Clash of the Champions. Let's say 150. I don't remember what number it was. And then that's when Hulk debuted live on Clash of the Champions. He ran down and got face to face. Now it's funny because they had fought, a lot of times in house shows in WWF,
Yeah.
and they were in the same ring a lot in WWF.
yeah, they did, but
But they never had the face off. But WCW from the beginning is like, no, we're fucking facing.
We
those
are
two
doing
off.
this.
We're getting Hulk Hogan in here to fight Flair. That's why we're bringing him in.
fucking finally.
Which is what you thought Vince was doing in '91. It
Yeah,
didn't happen.
exactly.
yeah, exactly.
So Hulk and Flair face off. Crowd kind of goes nuts. Half the crowd's actually booing Hulk at this point, live on Clash of the Champions. So now you realize,
because
like,
they love Flair though.
well, not
I mean,
even that. Yes, absolutely. So now he's on Flair's territory. But the thing is like, I don't even realize to this day there was a core WCW audience that fucking hated Hulk and Vince. That entire time,
Yeah.
they were doing what the hardcore wrestling fan was like, fuck you, cartoon guy. Fuck
Yeah.
you, cartoon promoter. For
This
doing what
is
you do."
wrestling. Right?
You know
Yeah,
what they were
so-
doing, right? They were
We've been hanging and banging, brother.
Good Lord. Cuz gets a soundboard and shit.
it's over now.
Shit's going
baby.
nuts right now. So a nice added feature to our podcast. Very fun. DDP, hello. So WCW brings them in, and of all promotions, the number 2 promotions, like, we're gonna book this shit right. They get that match, and Dave, they actually fucking have that match. Hulk
Yes.
Hogan's first match in is Bash of the Beach '94, challenging Ric Flair for the WCW Championship. Fuck becoming number 1 contender at this point. He's goddamn Hulk Hogan. Just bring him in off the streets. Bring him in off the streets with a can of beans and fucking a will to win, and he's going to face Ric Flair for the WCW Heavyweight Championship at Bash of the Beach.
And do you know why? Because it's WCW.
11-time world champion, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Will Flair wrestle Hogan? It's never happened before. Will it happen now? Is this the big one?
The big one?
Find out at WCW's Bash at the Beach, Sunday, July 17th, live and only on pay-per-view.
So finally, we see Hogan versus Flair, and this is at Bash at the Beach, 1994. Much anticipation. Justice talked about it, and Hogan does take that WCW title, it is the first time they've ever met in a real pay-per-view setting or even televised setting.
And built up to be the dream match that we all
Sure.
wanted. So unfortunately, we get this in 1994, which both men were well into their 40s at this point. Hulk Hogan had tons of ring rust, but let's break it down. The match itself was entertaining. It was good.
Yeah, but it did. But do you think it delivered?
No.
No.
Compared to what it needed to be, what Hogan and Flair in our imaginations in the 80s should have been, I don't even know if they would have wrestled a different match in their primes, to be quite honest with you.
No, this is where I kind of come in. I just don't think they mesh.
No, and you found that out the hard way. And I think
Yeah.
Vince noticed that. It's funny that we give him shit for not giving us Hulk versus Flair.
That's
Mania
why
8.
he put it in house shows.
But that's why you put it in house shows, and that's why Vince doesn't care. It's like Phil Jackson. He doesn't give a shit what name is on his bench. Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. He's like, I'm going to bench you if you suck, and I'm going to use you to your strengths. I don't care how much. I'm not going to put you out there because you're selling a lot of jerseys, or you have a lot of sponsorship from Nike, or you increase ratings.
You have the biggest contract.
Yeah, you increase ratings on the TV that we're on. We are going to win championships. I'm using you as a tool on my team. And we never gave Vince enough credit. Looking back, it was actually very smart of Vince to do that. And Vince, of all people, shows you the balls on this guy. You can hate him or love him. Said nay to the dream match of the century, or let's say the decade, or whatever you want to say.
It was
Not
probably,
century.
it was probably.
I actually looked up what I was saying earlier. According to this, his first WCW World Heavyweight Championship reign is the longest in history, while his first WWE Championship reign is the third longest ever.
Which was a year. His first WCW title reign was a year, literally. No, a little over a year. He won it in July of Bash at the Beach, July of 94, and he lost it in October of 95. So 94 Bash at the Beach.
No, I was talking to Cuz's point. He said
I don't like Cuz.
because I have Flair's longest run at 452 days. Is that?
I mean, we could bring someone else up, you know.
No, Flair.
Like
that was
I
think that was NWA.
That's okay. That's why. So the WCW.
It's the same fucking thing, but
that's the problem, right? Okay. So that's my clarification.
It's not the same thing, but it is.
Yeah. We've. You know what? I have flashbacks of Jess and Joe trying to explain the NWA title to me as a kid, and me looking like a fucking idiot.
You still look like that now.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, well, at least I can admit
and the
to
territories.
It now.
No, it's not your lack of intelligence. It's just like it's foreign.
Fuck?
It's foreign to especially wrestling fans now.
He's like, it's not the NWA title day, but it is the NWA title. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, and now that you can kind of see the history of it, you're like, wow, this was really confusing. So
I do appreciate what they're trying to do nowadays. NWA trying to reestablish some of that.
I don't mind it.
Not to go off on
a
tangent on that one. No, you're right. It probably won't. But
it's not gonna work.
You can appreciate.
It's appreciated. Yeah,
it's not gonna work.
So
that's fine.
We get appreciated. That. We know it didn't deliver.
We go for 20 minutes. It's appreciated. I know, but it's not gonna work.
Which is one of the areas where.
But it's appreciated though. No, I know, but it's not gonna work. Yeah. No, I know, but it's appreciated. No, it's not gonna work.
It's just.
Yeah, but I know this is appreciated though.
See the episode where Cousin Jess for 40 minutes say the same fucking thing.
All right, so
that'd be fucking great though.
Let me try to steer this wheel back into play.
No, David, it's appreciated. What
hey,
yeah, awesome better than.
But it's not gonna work.
Nobody cares.
You're never gonna steer the ship back.
So, what happens now is that I think even Bischoff and others start to see that the Hogan era is. Well, the Hogan face era is winding down, is probably putting it nicely.
But I don't want to yada past the match. So it happens.
Yeah, it happens. It's good.
They have it in Florida. They put I think it was 12,000 people in there, which is a big crowd for WCW. Yeah. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. And it looked like when you really go back and look at this pay-per-view with Bischoff putting production value into it, it almost looked like a WWF pay-per-view. The arena was lit up. There's a lot of people there. There's no fucking empty seats in the hard camera side.
Yeah,
and Hulk drew those people in and all that. And it was a big deal. Michael Buffer came in and introduced it. They had a good match, a good basic heel versus face match. Would you expect that from Hogan versus Flair? No. They leaned back on that because they figured, you know what? We just got to get Hulk in here. It ironically became WCW's highest pay-per-view buy rate in history at this point.
I'm sure it did.
And it was one of their largest crowds that they've ever had at that
10,000 plus, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's all great, but at the end of the day, we all realize, and so did people of, I guess of WCW lore, like the Bishops of the world. They realize that shit that is not going to work out the way we thought. This is not going to have the sustaining factor that we probably anticipated it's going to have. Plus, Jess has talked about this. Hogan has limited dates, right?
Yeah, his contract was super duper special, meaning Hogan gets rich.
Yeah,
that was his special contract.
This is the
it
real
said that
Hogan
at the
money.
top of his contract is that Hogan's going to fucking be literally swimming in money.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree. I think that it did everything that Bischoff wanted financially and behind the scenes. We as wrestling fans wanted it to be this big splash that finally you see the dream match. It was fucking, to Dave Meltzer, 5-star, then oh my God, and all this stuff. But Bischoff I don't think Bischoff gave a shit about the quality in the ring. He just touched himself when he got the buy rate in, when the gate from the pay-per-view came, or the live gate from the pay-per-view came in. And to use Hulk for international purposes, for advertising purposes. Oh, you got Hulk Hogan? Yeah. We'll buy it. We'll buy a space on your TV. Advertisers started to come around and buy, and then it's the truth. And people shit on Bischoff and say, oh, we overspent and all that stuff. And they cut costs just so they can get Hogan aboard. Bischoff said from day one, and I believe Bischoff on this. This is where I really decide with Bischoff. I know people shit on Bischoff a lot, but he's like, I wouldn't have hired Hulk if we couldn't have afforded it, if I didn't get it approved and the budget approved. He's like, I had cut costs and got confidence in the upper management that I knew what to do. They stopped house shows for a long time because they were only drawing like 500 people a fucking show.
Which also kind of his idea, like instead of having more house shows, let's go bigger, but you're losing money.
Everybody before Bischoff was like, yeah, let's go bigger. We'll force it on the fans. We'll force it on the market. But you're losing tons of money.
Yeah, so you're just going to lose more money. So
you're paying wrestlers per contract and they're getting a percentage of house shows. And there's no money out there. So you're paying them to go out there, and whatever little money you're making, which is nothing, you're giving away and to the wrestlers because they have it in their contract. So Bischoff just knew, if I cut the house shows back, I increase production value, I syndicate our shit, I make it look nicer, I bring it in, I brush it up with Hulk Hogan, it looks more professional now. He's the biggest name in wrestling up to this point. And I can appeal to advertisers. Oh, you have Hulk Hogan. Okay, no problem. Oh, you want to do a tour of Japan? You got Hulk Hogan. Cool. Like, and WCW had always dabbled in Japan before.
Of course.
But I mean, like, it was just a big selling point for Bischoff. So behind the scenes, this was working well for Bischoff. But here by 95, Hulk was tired and old again and getting booed and all this stuff, So they limped along. Hogan and Flair basically came and burnt bright really quick and did what it needed to do. And then Bischoff's long vision was really just to kind of push Hogan, and Flair got shit on in his own company at this point.
Well, yeah,
in the WWF, Vince pushes him, makes him a star of one of their biggest pay-per-views of the year. He wins the championship as a heel. Yeah. And then you go to Flair's territory, and I'm not saying Hogan should have lost. I'm not saying that at all, because you got to get your money worth of Hogan. Yeah. But then afterwards, they don't treat Flair good at all. They shit on him.
Well, and this is especially when this whole faction comes in. So, the backstory, you hear Bischoff talking about it. He talks about those factions.
Bischoff can say all he wants. He never liked Flair.
I'd say
I don't care what anybody says.
He likes him now, but he didn't like him then.
I don't think he liked the Flair character. Yeah. I think he felt that if Flair was going to turn an industry around, he would have done it before. And Hulk Hogan had been the only guy that had blazed that trail before. Yeah. That's what Bischoff believed.
And I find that so interesting because of the limitations of the territory of Crockett and obviously of WCW, and then they pull it back even more where it's only syndication. You're not going territory. You're not actually doing house shows where you can't get exposure. And I can't see how any of that is Flair's fault, but that's the kind of stuff that
that's a good point you bring up. The industry was changing like crazy, not just from what the fans wanted, because ECW started gaining a lot of traction in 95, 96. So the hardcore fan was gravitating to that because they were just like, we want real wrestling. We don't want this shit anymore. Now WWF shit and now WCW shit because they're trying to cartoon us to death. They're
that's where you talk about the real. The real comes in, and Bischoff has finally admitted to this on his podcast where he finds the real and these invaders, coming over from.
Now we're fast forwarding to 96.
Yeah, we're getting to 96 because 95 is a shit show.
But Bischoff was straightening. Nitro debuted in September of 95.
Yeah, but this whole time, Bischoff in that 95 realm, he's seen all this stuff and he's building this idea of, I want invaders and I want to shit on my own company by using these invaders to take over this company. And he's thinking about this all the while, and he's thinking about what contracts are coming up. So
So yeah, so the industry was changing on top of it, and what the fans wanted was changing more importantly. So in 95, both companies were just crap. Yeah. And you had to go to ECW and other promotions and probably Japan at this point to, if you're a real hardcore wrestling fan, to get your wrestling fixed, because God knows WCW and WWF was not giving it to you. Yeah. So in 96, he started getting like the luchas in there. Not so much the luchas yet, but like he got Rey Mysterio, he got Eddie Guerrero, he got Chris Jericho, he got Benoit. And Benoit had been there since like 93. Yeah. Benoit had been there on and off since 93. Don't forget the whole, Benoit came back full time in like late 95. On both shows in the same week. Well, yeah. Well, and the launch of Nitro happened in September of 95. Yeah. Bischoff launched a literal war and just said, like, I'm going to read the results to WWF on my program. WWE, they would pre-tape. They would do like 2 live Nitros or Raws, a month, but then tape one right after to air it so they can cut down on live costs. Well, when Bischoff started, he got the approval and the budget to do Nitro live every week. So every beginning of every Nitro for the first like 2 months, he would read the results of Raw on the air because it was taped. And so that just, he was rocking the industry at this point. So he still got Hulk and Flair beating a dead horse. Savage is there. He's feuding with Flair, and they're having good matches for what you'd expect of them or whatever. But again, Hulk and Flair were just so played out and tired at this point. Now we get to 1996, Bash at the Beach. Hall and Nash have already debuted. Hall and Nash already debuted as their names, Hall and Nash, not Diesel, not Ramon. They come in, they start hyping up a third guy. Well, lo and behold, it became Hulk Hogan was the third guy. At the end of Bash at the Beach, he leg drops, he comes out, looks like he's going to defend WCW, turns on them, trash is thrown in the ring, he turns heel, NWO is off and running. Now you have Flair, who's still kind of like part of the Horsemen, but they have this version of the Horsemen that's it's kind of blah. And ironically, Hulk's first real opponent afterwards at the Clash of Champions, after he wins the title as Hollywood Hogan, he defends against Ric Flair. Sure. And it's funny, they always go back to Flair. And it's funny, Flair writes about that in his book, and most historians write about the fact that for as much as Bischoff shit on Flair, and other promoters have tried to shit on him, when the going gets rough, they always go back to Flair. Yeah. Even though NWO was hot, what good opponent could Hulk's like, put Flair in there with me because I'm comfortable with him. So again, Hulk and Flair on and off touched a lot in 95. I'm going back to 95. It's just shit TV. It was Hulk, Anderson and Flair versus Hulk and Booty Man, Anderson and Flair versus Hulk and Savage, Anderson and Flair. And I mean, Hulk and Flair probably wrestled a million times between Hulk's debut in 94 and the formation of the NWO. Really, yeah, it was really over at this point. NWO launched. We can't yada past that. Flair had some part. They did feud. Horseman feuded with NWO on and off here and there. But that's over as quick as you could even think about. Yeah. It was never a big plan for Flair to be any kind of... Hulk was the centerpiece, Yeah. He was. This is where it gets really rough. But this is important to our topic. He was a centerpiece because he was that big. In the sense of, look at what he did for Vince in the 80s, and Bischoff ended up kind of massaging him in. And yes, Hall and Nash coming aboard with their cool young look on wrestling and all that stuff like helped a lot. The NWO concept helped a lot without Hulk turning heel. But Flair was a company man. He played face. He played heel. He did everything he had to do in the next 3 or 4 years during the Monday Night Wars and the progression of the NWO. Sting ended up being the big centerpiece for WCW and all that stuff, and not Flair. He had legal problems. He comes back, and he had a lot of emotional moments, like when he came back in 98 and cried in the ring and, whatever. And he faced Bischoff at Starrcade in 98 and all this stuff. And I don't want to yada past all that, but we kind of have to.
Careful what you wish for, because now you have it. What a goof! What a goof! I get accused of getting racked in the head a few times and having a little touch of Alzheimer's. My God! I almost forgot the fourth horseman, Ric Flair! Go down here! Here we go!
So, and I could be fast forwarding a little too far because I don't, we can.
No, I think it isn't. I think staying on this topic, you should yada past it because the whole topic is Hulk versus Flair.
Yeah.
And even though they fought or wrestled each other, whatever you want to say, many times, it was
Hogan's time.
Once Hulk came aboard in WCW and they had their original match at Bash at the Beach, it was over. Yeah. Because Bischoff had a different vision and it involved Hulk and it did not involve Flair for the most part.
Yeah.
He was fine with keeping Flair.
He was wrestling that whole Invader thing for a few years.
Yeah.
He was really trying to put that
together. Was all about that. And that was it. I think that the Hulk versus Flair thing really ended. Even in 2000, when WCW was in the trash can, Hulk and Flair tried to kind of revive their feud.
Yeah,
they fought at a couple pay-per-views and a couple Nitros, but it was done. I mean, it was really done. When WCW went under in 2001, they both came back to WWF. Hulk came back in 2002 and fought The Rock, and everybody knows what
that's
that
where
was.
I pick it up.
Yes.
So, but before that, though, Flair picks up, actually, just to give you a few more numbers, not really stats, Flair picks up 2 more WCW title runs before he comes back to WWE in 2002. Now WWE, I believe, at that point, right?
Not quite yet.
So still
almost. Yeah, because it was still WWF.
Yeah,
2003.
2003.
So still WWF.
Because he came back in November, right?
Yeah.
Right after Survivor Series, or
he was like the half owner or something, or
yeah.
After the invasion able took the shit, he came
basically.
And even crazier, he ends up challenging Hogan again. And did he win?
No, of course not.
No, he didn't win.
Now Hulk was riding the Nostalgia Tour in 2002.
Yeah, he
beat Triple H for the title. Flair ended up challenging Hulk for the championship just for nostalgia factor or whatever. And Hulk
exactly, and he lost. And then he pours on a slight feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then you got Hogan and Rock. You got Flair working Evolution at this time. I know we're kind of fast forwarding.
That's fine.
But I have to ask, at this point, do wins and losses matter with these guys when we're talking about the best ever? Because we see Flair winning a ton of titles, but we see him losing a ton, and we see Flair never really beating Hogan to begin with.
No,
right?
I think after Hulk comes to WCW in '94, obviously Bischoff just had Hulk shit all over Flair, and Hulk beat him all the time.
Yeah.
That's when it stopped mattering in the sense of now at this point you just start comparing their body of work and what they mean to the industry. At that point, I really believe the Hulk versus Flair feud or the dream match thoughts or the comparison died in '94 after Hulk debuted and
of course
did all that stuff.
Yeah,
that's why I think so. I think that discussion
because imagine what would happen if it happened in WWE first, WWF at the time.
Yeah,
if Hulk didn't leave,
who knows what would happen?
All that stuff. I mean,
man.
It's funny, we start out hot and heavy, and then now it just kind of fizzes out like this. And really, that's the way their feud fizzed out. It just died. A lot happened after '94 with both guys, but not together. Not Hulk versus Flair.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Which is the topic of.
It's
today.
like what can you say though? Like
the biggest biggest dream match of all time never got the big match,
the big
expected. Moment. The WrestleMania send off that we thought it would. It went to WCW. Maybe WCW will do it right. Nope. It was just really a stage for Hulk to come in and take over WCW.
What we could do is future podcasts. We could do a fantasy booking. What if Hogan versus Austin would that have been better?
Oh, no fantasy booking. I'm gonna throw it on the table.
Well, that's one worthy. But nothing. Flair and Hogan. To me, I would have to say. I don't know.
Well, let me break it down for you guys by the numbers here, so you can just get some perspective.
Break it down numbers, and I'll tell you why.
Flair is a 16-time champion, recognized.
Yes,
anywhere from 21 to 25 on record.
Flair himself says 21.
Hogan's 13.
Yeah, Hogan is 12, but he likes to claim 13.
The IWGP, right?
That's a lie.
Yeah, okay,
it's a lie. Now Hogan held the title for a 4-year run. Flair's longest title run in any capacity was 452 days. Still quite impressive for a territory situation. Flair, when we take out the numbers and we start looking at just who they were and how they worked, Flair was that classic heel that everybody chased in those territories and did a fantastic job of that. Probably the best in that.
And in essence, it's hard as the heel.
Yeah. That's
to do that.
That's really difficult. And to
be
hot,
a successful heel and stay hot.
Keep heel heat for almost a decade.
What Flair did in the 80s should never be understated. Ever.
It might not, and
or underestimated.
And it will probably never be duplicated. While Hogan was that face that broke all wrestling rules. Faces don't.
And what Hulk did in the 80s should never be underestimated.
That's what I want to say. You have to add on to that. Like you have two contrasting points. Like from the wrestling perspective, the wrestlers will tell you the greatest of all time is Flair.
Sure.
But from a fan perspective, because of
They'll say
money,
it's Hogan.
because tickets and
Yeah.
sales, and who everyone's
And
favorite
showmanship.
is Hogan. So it's like you got that yin and yang. It's like they're both
the
greatest of all time.
That
I
brings
think
me
is
to
what you gotta say.
this is what I was writing at late at night, and probably a little.
That's just how you right off the bat. That's how you think about it.
Under the whiskey, Hogan was mainstream, but Flair was clearly the better ring performer, right? While Mike worked slightly beaten by Flair, Hogan had all sorts of energy and had that kid follow
the promos.
But Rick's promos.
I saw Hulk Hogan
I
live. My very first live house show. I didn't get to see a house show live until '92. I started watching wrestling in '87 because of Hulk.
Sure.
He was at the tail end of his WWF run. It was Hulk and Piper versus Flair and Sid, and it was about it was like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before Mania 8, and Hulk was wearing out at this point. We went to the LA Sports Arena. My parents surprised me for my birthday in March of 92. So it's before Mania 8, probably like 2 weeks before.
Jesus.
I have never heard a reaction like what Hulk got until Steve Austin got huge.
Yeah.
I saw Steve Austin right before Mania 14, and Craig and I looked at each other and said, oh my God, like he's getting to that point. And then I saw him a month after he won the title, Austin, and I was like, that's a Hogan pop right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw Hogan at the tail end of his WWF career in '92, and I can't explain to you what it was to watch him walk down. It was a house show at LA Sports Arena. LA Sports Arena holds like, let's say 16,000.
Sure.
I would say there was 14,000 there for a house show.
Yeah.
And people went fucking nuts when Hulk came out. I can't even put into words right now what
I love him like a brother.
not only that I did, not only what that meant to me as a fan, as a Hulk Hogan fan, because I was a huge fan of him. He's the reason why I watch wrestling now. But to see that live, I can't describe to you how fucking loud that pop was.
Yeah.
In a house show. And he was teaming with Piper, and Piper got a huge pop too, but Hulk was on a different level. Like, it was amazing. There was one moment where, just to give you, I don't remember what side of the arena I was sitting on, but Hulk Hogan was out. It was a tag match.
Sure.
Piper was in the ring with Flair.
Mm-hmm.
And what Piper kept doing, he was getting beat down. He was getting heat on himself and kept trying to tag Hulk. And then Flair would cut him off and get the crowd to get all pissed off. And then go to tag again. And then somebody would come in behind the ref's back and pull Piper in by his feet. And the crowd would be like, bullshit. Hulk had his back to me, of the side of the ring. I was about midway up in the arena. I wasn't on the floor. He had his back to us because that's just the side of the ring that he was on. Piper almost tagged him. And then I think Sid came from behind and pulled Piper's feet while Flair distracted the referee. And Hulk turned around and looked at us. And every fucking person in my section stood up and fucking cheered.
Just on
for him turning around and looking at us going, come on, they're cheating. Like he was playing up to the crowd. That's how big Hulk Hogan was. I don't even know if I did a good job explaining that right now. But like,
I get it.
He turned around and looked at us, and people fucking fainted almost, like, because we cheer so loud.
Yeah.
All he had to do was turn his motherfucking body, and the whole like 6,000 people on that section fucking erupted. Like, and I can't describe to you what he was in the 80s and what I know common wrestling fans now, they remember the Rock era more. They remember the Attitude era more. And I'm not saying, I've seen the Rock and Stone Cold in their prime.
Yeah.
Massive pops on par with Hulk. No question. But until that moment, I had never felt energy in my life like that. I can't describe to you, even though I'm trying to right now, what it was like to see him live and to feel that energy is fucking amazing. That's why you went to house shows, by the way.
Yeah.
To feel that. It's so different now in wrestling. And I'm telling you, man, like, I'm privileged to feel that and to recall that story. And I got to see it in Austin and Rock, and they were just as magical as Hulk.
The closest thing I ever got to that was Cena winning a match on I think it was a SmackDown, and coming into the crowd. He
was that
6 feet from
when
us,
we went with Tyler?
Cena had a lot of electricity.
Yeah, they were going bonkers for that.
When I saw Cena at a house show,
he was climbing on his US.
Was that when we? Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, we saw him at Judgment Day.
Yeah,
and he got a lot of pop too.
Yeah,
and I saw Cena in a house show well after he had won the title, and he was getting half booed and half cheered all the time.
Yeah,
even though he was half cheered and half booed at this house show I saw Cena, you felt that buzz. You felt that little buzz.
Yeah.
He wasn't as big as Hulk and wasn't as big as Austin or The Rock, but
anymore.
But he had that magic, that caring from the crowd, the emotion. So I don't know where he even left off after that. But I just don't want to understate what Hulk did in the 80s, even though Flair.
We all know who you think is better.
Not necessarily.
I'll play devil's advocate on that a little bit. If you want.
Well, what question are you asking us right now?
I already asked you who's better.
We're doing it right now.
We're doing it right now.
So
that was your argument.
Our judgment here is going to define history of wrestling. So whatever we decide here, that's fucking it forever. Yes,
forever.
All right. Well, go to here
now
first.
Forever. Well, I'll play a little because I already know Jess is going to say Hogan's the best.
You don't even know that right now. You haven't asked me yet.
Oh, stop it. So here's what I think. I think Flair's slightly better on the mic. I think Flair is more thought out. Flair has more fun. Flair can adapt.
Flair's more than slightly better. Hulk Hogan's great on. Hulk Hogan's really good on the mic and entertaining.
But Flair's a genius.
But Ric Flair's probably one of the best promos. I mean, The Rock's up there with them. Dusty's great.
I just didn't. I didn't want.
Flair's one of the best stickmen ever.
I don't want to shit on Hogan with that. What were you gonna say, Cuz?
Oh, Hogan wasn't bad though, but Flair's on another level.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I'm gonna go from like pro wrestling perspective, and I would go with Flair.
Well, that's obvious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking at
me though, like I was just looking at those.
You're
two
looking at the
things
ring work.
because
It's Flair. I gotta tell you, man.
Because I respect both. I talk shit.
I can't even think about how many drunken nights I've had with Jess and probably a few other of our friends.
Slick Rick, I am baseball, and I am the world heavyweight wrestling champion.
Those Hulkamaniacs out there, they're just like my man Stone. First blood, man. Instinct alone. Go for broke no matter what it takes. Hang on to that WWF title.
You know, Hulk, you've got a little bit of that Rambo in yourself, you know.
You know, you're exactly right. That's why the people of Oakland get off on me. They don't care if I come riding up in a big long limousine or with a 24-inch pythons hanging off a big hall.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, though, yeah, we all know that Flair is that performer in the ring, but there is more to it. But the question I would ask, though, is
what are you saying now? You said tie.
He said
the only reason because I was looking from both aspects.
I think you should go to jail for that.
No, because I'm looking from both aspects. But yeah, if I had to go strictly pro wrestling from a pro wrestling perspective, I would say Flair.
So you're choosing Flair.
I'm choosing Flair.
Fuck,
you would choose that. But I'm just saying I'm looking at it from both. I'm looking from the fans and entertainment side, and I'm looking from the pro wrestling and the pro wrestlers would pick. That's what I was saying earlier about Hogan and Flair, but they're equally great. But yeah, if you had an arrow down from a pro wrestling perspective, Flair.
That's super liberal of you. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying. I mean, I'm not, but
pick it up, Jess. What you got?
I'm nothing.
What are you asking me? I'm sorry, Dave.
Who's the greatest, bro? You fucking homer.
So, contrary to popular belief, I really like Flair a lot and respect.
Oh, I know you do.
He's fantastic. He was the greatest wrestler of all time for a long time before I think that Kurt Angle kind of was a little better. And that's only because Father Time, you're going to get, Shawn Michaels. I don't care for Michaels, but in all honesty, I don't disagree when people say that he might be the greatest wrestler of all time, U.S. wrestler of all time. There's a lot of Japanese wrestlers that are on par with those guys, but Okada nowadays being one of them. But that can't be understated. For him to be considered, there was a groundswell of I don't want to say dirt sheets because they were kind of relevant in the 80s, but not really. But hardcore wrestling fans, there was a groundswell against Vince and Hulk, a small one, but it was there that supported Flair and loved his in-ring work. The Ricky Steamboat matches, the Terry Funk matches, the Dusty Rhodes matches, even the race matches back in the early 80s for what they were. Flair worked his ass off, was a workhorse, has an amazing character. He's just as charismatic as Hulk is. He really is. He's better on the mic than Hulk. Flair's one of the best people I've ever heard on the mic. But if I'm being honest, and maybe it's because of the way he got me into wrestling, Hogan, I don't know how you can, even if you weigh it out, if you try to say Flair was technically better, I don't think Flair was ever a technical marvel either. No. He was not an Angle or a Lou Thez or like a Bob Backlund or anybody like that. He was a great pro wrestler and he learned how to put people over and he was a great heel. Flair's probably one of the best heels in wrestling I've ever seen.
Great.
Because you think of guys like Bruiser Brody and he's a great heel because he was a maniac. Abdul the Butcher, Terry Funk. all
those
great
guys, yeah.
heels, but Flair was a great heel in the sense that he was on a higher level. He was a great
He
working
didn't have
heel.
to do hardcore.
He knew how to work a match and make anybody the old saying with Flair, he can get in there with a broomstick and still have a passable match, more than a passable match. Yeah. And later on we saw, was it Omega that wrestled the blow up doll? Or the girl or whoever?
Yeah, the blow up doll and the 9-year-old girl.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just funny because that's what Flair was back in the day.
But if you name those three guys, the hardcore guys, those guys had to do it through hardcore crazy matches, and Flair, he didn't.
Funk was good in his time.
Well, yeah, no, true. You're right.
But
that's what they're notorious. All the three of those guys.
That's a good point.
But Flair could do it without that.
No, he did, but he was NWA champion. He had to go. Imagine like Dave, you having to go to a different store, every month.
Sure.
And you couldn't shit on them and be like, I come from this territory, so I'm better than you. It didn't matter. You had to blend in with them and accentuate and make it look like they could be better than you, but then you were actually teaching them better. You were leaving them better than when you found them.
Yeah.
Which is what a good manager is and what a good trainer is. Yeah. But most people like to come into a new environment and dominate and say my way's better, better than you. You're doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
So, but Flair as the NWA champion, he had to go to different promotions, had to accentuate everybody. I got to fight Junkyard Dog tonight. Well, fuck, he's super huge in Atlanta and he's super huge in the Carolinas. So I got to make it look like he's a fucking megastar.
I got to get my ass kicked for 95% of the match and squeak out.
Yes. Yeah. So I understand that part of the business. And I understand that Flair's value. People like Flair are valuable to this business. But so if you want to ask me who's better for wrestling, I still say Hulk.
Yeah, I believe it.
Because he wasn't terrible in the ring.
No,
I'm not saying I like his politics afterwards. So I guess maybe I just shit on my own comment. No. For wrestling, Hulk wasn't great. He always politicked in the back. He never elevated anybody. He never did. It was always, who can you feed me? I like you, brother. You're big. So I can leg drop you later and beat you. Because Hulk was always defensive like that because he learned from the best, Vince Jr.
Oh, shit.
And so Hulk always had that. But I still say, if you just go off accomplishments and what they did for the industry, whether Hulk knew it or not, think about that run that he had. He slammed Andre, 93,000 people. Russell, yes, he was with the greatest promoter of all time, Vince McMahon. But people say, if Hulk didn't come along, Vince would have used Orndorff or Piper or someone else.
No, it would not have been the same thing.
No,
not
that's Hulk's value right there. You could try to say Hulk was only successful because of Vince, but I say his charisma, he just had it. He was that guy. It was fate. Like, it was that way. No other person would fill that gap like Hulk did. Hulk made tons of fucking money off one promotion that said, I'm going away from the NWO umbrella. That's a big deal. And Vince had faith in him. I have a Hulk. Like, that's a huge deal. He beats Andre, the famous match with the Warrior. Who he put over, by the way. People shit on him. All that stuff. He defined an era. Then he goes to WCW and he does financially in the back what they need for him to do. I mean, I'm not saying Hulk, again, he did kind of politic a little bit and he didn't put people over when he should have, but like Bischoff got to a point with that company where it was profitable and successful. And then the NWO happens. If Sting would have turned heel, probably wouldn't have been as impactful. No, because what faces would have faced him? Like, if Savage would have turned heel and went NWO, it wouldn't have worked. Hulk Hogan turning heel in '96 was so captivating and so groundbreaking. Once again, for the second time, he ushered in a new era of wrestling. It was NWO and WCW that brought Vince up to that level to create the Attitude Era, to combat them and fight them in the Monday Night Wars. So I say, I love Flair and I respect the shit out of him. But like, to me, Hulk is the best that's ever been. Even more than Austin to me, even more than The Rock. Only because Austin's pissed. Just because The Rock got mega famous afterwards with movies. The Rock in ring, he did okay, but he didn't. Austin already paved that way for him, right? You know,
he did.
Brought the Attitude Era back. And I love Austin too. So I don't want to hear any Austin supporters hating on me. But the thing is like, Vince started branding the WWF as a brand when he had Austin. I'm using Foley and DX and The Rock and Austin. Austin was the catalyst, and Austin was that special guy that caught fire. But at the same time, that water that Hulk and Vince were in the 80s was just something we're never going to see again.
Yeah, that was different.
Never going to fucking see again. So big in the fact that it lured Flair over in 91 because of Hulk and because of Vince.
Yep.
I can't dispute that.
Yeah.
I can't dispute someone that says Flair's better, but at the same time, Hulk's the best to me. He's the best. For all he's flawed and for all the bad he's done sometimes, he's the best.
He changed the wrestling world.
He is magic. I still watch him to this day
Twice.
sometimes.
By the way, he changed the wrestling world twice.
Yes. I still watch him sometime to this day and get lost and be like, God, like your magic was, I can't even describe your energy and your magic. It's weird. Like, so that's my choice. Cuz chose wrong. I chose right.
If I had to narrow it down to one, I'm going to go from that perspective, like I said earlier. But it's, if you really ask me to narrow it, I mean, if I didn't narrow it down, it would be hard for me to choose because of that. Everything that you said. Hogan, influential, man. Like,
yeah,
he brought wrestling to mainstream.
I wish he was better backstage and a better mentor. But Michael Jordan has tried owning teams and coaching, and he's not great at it either.
But I was gonna say, like you said earlier, if Vince, what'd you say? People said that, oh, Vince could have done it with Paul Ondroff and who else?
Anybody,
Just
Piper,
anybody.
Andre, anybody.
And it's just,
same,
it's
but
just
on the same level.
The answer is
just
nope
a comment
to that.
Yeah,
on the same level. Vince couldn't have done it with anyone else other than Austin during that time either.
No, Austin represented
it was just
that,
a new
that
phase,
era
new
that
era.
what the fans wanted.
and that's for another day. Right?
It is.
It
Oh,
is
yeah.
for another day. But I mean, like it.
God damn it! I had to mention that.
I love Austin. Austin has a
can't.
major place, and
You
we will
just-
do an Austin episode, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and he deserves it.
We'll
and
get there.
I've loved Austin.
We're gonna build
since-
that up for a year.
I've loved Austin.
We're gonna
since,
mention
We'll
Austin,
talk.
Texas.
We'll definitely talk about that.
Hollywood Blondes.
You know, I'm gonna play a little bit of
Sorry about that.
devil's advocate on it because I
Do it.
can tell you, I agree with everything that Jess.
Are you
is
gonna
saying.
fucking say Big John said right now? I feel you're gonna
No,
say
he's
Big John
gonna-
said.
No, he's the most amazing.
The two choices. It's not going to be Hogan.
I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
It has to.
No, all I want to say is, like, we know that Flair is superior mic work. Flair is the superior.
I think he's the
wrestler.
worker
He's a
favorite.
superior
He's the
He's the
worker's
worker
favorite.
favorite. That's and he's also kind of like the guy that everybody can relate to because he's not 300 pounds. He's about 240. You know, which is kind of where we're sitting. And you have to weigh in the fact that without Hogan, nobody in this room would probably be talking about wrestling right now. In this room,
Probably wouldn't be
I
talking
know.
about
I
Flair.
can say for me, for
you wouldn't.
sure,
You wouldn't be talking about Flair.
because of what Vince did and the way he syndicated stuff. I didn't have to have
Yeah.
cable to see Hogan. I don't know if I would have been gravitated to Flair like I was Hogan.
No,
Yeah.
because
Hogan
you
was
need
this
that
comic book
Hogan
character that came to life.
You need that contrast
only-
right
the
there.
only
He wearing
thing
bright
I
yellow
wanna-
tights.
The only
Yeah.
thing I want to say is to play that other side a little bit is Flair. You can't really control where you come up to. You can't control what
era
come
you
into,
came
what
aboard.
era you came
Of
into.
course.
And Flair can't control where he was dominating. You can't help the fact that Flair came into Southern wrestling and Flair became a territory wrestler. I would really like to see what could have the what ifs. I don't want to talk about what ifs, but what if Flair had that bubble and had that money and had that syndication that Hogan had? I don't know where that would have shot off into the stratosphere. So because of everything that Flair did, in spite of his limitations, I wanna give that nudge slightly to Flair, only because I think Hogan's got the look, Hogan's got the body,
He's got everything.
he's got everything.
He was
But
influential.
he had the rocket ship, and Flair had the little firework to ride on, and people still know who Flair is. Flair still came up into the top realms of WWF because of how great he was on a territorial level, under people that didn't know what they were doing.
Hogan had
that
the Formula One. Flair had the
millions
Mercedes.
of dollars, and and Flair saved a dying freaking federation more than once because he's Ric Flair. I mean, in spite of all that.
Well, that's why I said you have to respect the pro wrestler side because of pro.
You talk about
we
Ted
all,
Turner.
We,
Ted Turner's like,
we
I will-
respect pro wrestlers.
Ted Turner's willing to save this and limp it along for 5 more years, but only if Flair's on board,
But
right?
You got to respect the other side of Hogan fucking made wrestling what it is.
Yeah.
So that's why, to me, that's why I was
And
saying
Flair
earlier,
got his biggest
I can't.
accolades on a national level when he went to WWF because Hogan built it
and that is true.
as a platform that it was.
Yeah,
That is true.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
that's what I'm saying. You got to respect.
So this is my
both
last
sides,
podcast
you know?
because you both chose Flair. So just
No.
signing off.
I told you I really
Fuck
couldn't,
off.
but I had to narrow it down. I'm gonna
It's-
go on the
No, and
wrestling side.
to this day, it's funny.
The
You know,
work is
I
set for
wanted
me.
this topic because, like, the funny thing is
All good
there's-
points.
There was never really a conclusion on the storyline side of it ever.
Yeah. No, it never really did.
It never did. And even though Flair got shit on and stuff like that in WCW, which was wrong and not okay.
He got shit on a couple of times. And
I feel that, I feel that there was no conclusion storyline wise as to who was ever better.
Yeah.
But we can debate on and on. I respect people who like Ric Flair and who, because you know what, if you got into Flair, you stayed involved in wrestling because you hated Hulk and Vince, but you stayed a wrestling fan because of Flair. I'm glad that there are wrestling fans still around, and I don't care how you got here. It's important that you get here because I love wrestling so much, and we all do. But like, I love wrestling so much, I don't ever want it to die. And I know, you know, we're on an era now where you have all these new promotions like AEW launching, and you know, NWA trying to make a comeback, and you know, PWG locally out here, and PCW, and Ring of Honor still kicking or whatever, and with All Elite Wrestling coming up, you know, and New Japan trying to have an American presence and all that stuff. I think it's a great time to be a fan. It's not like a Monday Night War vibe or anything right now, because WWE right now is doing shitty, in my opinion.
Very shitty.
I know in stock-wise they're doing well and they're getting all this money from TV deals, but like, they're really bad booking, bad storylines, bad character, you know, development. I think it's great to be a wrestling fan. So however you get there, if you grew up watching Flair and that's how you became a fan, that's great. I'm just glad you're a fan.
Well,
if you watch Hulk, and I'm just glad you watched Hogan and you're a fan.
And that's the hard part about the whole thing is that,
open that.
Like you said, nobody would be talking about wrestling in this room right now if not for Hogan. You know, and it could really be either way. You could put the nose, you know, it's like that Kentucky Derby.
They really are polar. I think Dave said it best earlier. I can't remember if you said it on record or not.
Well, they have a magnetic personality to come together, but as soon as
they're apart,
they're the yin yang.
Yeah, when they're apart, like you want to talk about them all the time about them coming together.
As soon as they come together,
as soon as they came together, it never really worked. They never had a stellar match. They never really had, and you can blame the bookers, you can blame the promoters or whatever, but it just never worked out. It never, that dream match that you talked about never matched. It never worked.
Never materialized.
Flair and Steamboat. Perfect.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
Just perfect. Flair and Savage, Flair and everybody else. Hulk and big guys. It was just the formula. You know, like Hulk and Orndorff had a great run.
The yin yangs, man.
Hulk and Piper, Hulk and Savage. You know, just people meshed together.
Hogan and Flair.
Yeah. Got Hulk and Savage.
And then the two biggest names ever, Hulk and Flair, never. Those like oil and water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So with that, guys, I want to just we're getting ready to sign off here shortly.
Well, fuck this episode.
But I have to. Goddamn. No. But I have to talk about something that I know that we're pretty proud of. If you guys haven't heard of it, there's a really cool app called WrestlePost, and we've actually just been honored enough to be on that app with the O.W.P. So we're very happy to be part of the WrestlePost family. You can find us on any Android or Apple app there, which is pretty cool.
If you download that app, it's so easy. You just click on us or search us in the search bar. Click on our logo, and they have links right there that you can go to our SoundCloud and our YouTube. But if you just want to go to SoundCloud and YouTube on your own, go to YouTube and type in the search bar on YouTube, type in our wrestling channel.
Yeah.
And it'll pull us up, subscribe to our channel, and all of our episodes are on there.
Yep.
This will be the 5th episode. Or you go to SoundCloud and search our wrestling podcast, and all of our episodes are going to be on there as well.
That's right.
So for the love of God, like download us on SoundCloud or listen to us on YouTube, however you want to do it. We just want you to hear us. We have an Instagram account. Our Instagram handle is OWP 2019. So go on Instagram and search OWP 2019. You'll pull us up. Follow us on Instagram. We post, we build up each episode. We kind of, every day of the week, we'll post some stuff to kind of entice you to tune in. Our new launch days are going to be Mondays now. Instead of Sundays. We think that's a little easier for editing and stuff like that. And Monday morning or Monday afternoon, whenever we launch it, just to start off your week on Monday, you got a brand new episode from our wrestling podcast, O.W.P. We're starting to get some good followers, guys. We got some good hits. We got some good followers now. Some people we don't even know are following us now on SoundCloud and Instagram, which is pretty exciting and cool.
Yeah.
So just follow us. Just listen to us. Just fucking do it. Stop being a dick. And fuck you. And Hulk Hogan's the best. And fuck everybody.
You're so
How about
angry.
that shit?
So angry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, guys. With that is the O.W.P. signing off. This is Butters along with Jess and Cuz. We will see you next week.